Hey guys, today we are talking about this Ugreen fast charger here. This is a PD 100 watt charger, 4 ports, 3 USB-C and 1 USB-A port. Now, inevitably, a lot of people will be comparing that against this original Apple's 96 watt charger with only 1 port. So, is it a replacement product? Is it better? Is it living up to its claim of 100 watts? Let's find out today. So recently I was trying to look for a replacement plug. Not that this is spoiled, but I wanted two to, put around the house so that I have to plug it in and out when I'm moving the laptop from my desk to the bed or to the couch. So I was looking for a replacement and this was costing 79 US dollars. In Singapore it sells for 99 US dollars. So that's like close to 100 bucks and it is only 1 port. So I didn't want to consider this. I didn't want to buy this until I have scoured the market and I bought this Ugreen PD charger. Now I've been using this for about 2 weeks now already. I've done extensive testing. I've charged everything, right? Everything that I can find in a house to test whether this charger is capable of delivering the power as well as the finesse to charge even the smaller appliances. So I realized that yes, actually this is a charger that lives up to its name. And in my summary up front, I'm going to tell you, if you are considering buying this Apple PD charger for 96 watts at $99 Singapore or $79, let me urge you, do consider this Ugreen charger. Why? Superpower number one, it is cheaper. The prices for these kind of China-made product, they tend to fluctuate quite a bit, and depending on the platform that you're buying it on, sometimes they have coupons, sometimes they have this. I'll leave the link in the description down below so you can check out the best links. Some of the links are actually affiliate links. So full disclaimer, I might get a small commission from the platform when you buy through the affiliate links, but you don't pay anything more. In fact, there will be some instances where I'm able to provide a coupon code, which I've negotiated for. And if you use the coupon code, you might be able to buy these even cheaper. So how much is this? About 70 Singapore dollars, which is right about 50 odd US dollars. So it is cheaper. Well, you might think it is not a whole lot cheaper. So why aren't you buying this? Now, if you stick around in the video, I will give you a bit more information on this particular product that we're looking at here and why it deserves your money more than the Apple's 96 watt charger. So first thing first, these are the product parameters. I won't go through everything. You just take a quick glance at it. I just want to tell you that it talks about the output here. Now, if you look at the output, there's a USB-C 1C, 2C, 3, and a USB-A. Why? Because ta-da, there are actually 4 ports here. Now, there are 3 USB-C ports. The first 2 USB-C ports, they are actually capable of 100 watt output, right? When used one at a time, of course. I'll go through the power distribution in a bit towards the end of the video. And the third port is actually supporting quick charge up to 20 watts. And the fourth port supports quick charge through a USB-A port up to 18 watts. Now, you might notice that in terms of similarities between these two chargers, you will notice that, well, I have already stated that the ports are actually very different. This one is only a single USB-C port. This has 4 ports in total, 3 USB-C and 1 USB-A. So very, very versatile. You don't have to scramble and, alternate charging between your iPhone, your iPad, or your tablet, and your laptop. And sometimes, you just wish that you had more port. So the next thing we need to look at is the physical dimension of it. So let me switch the camera angle so we can take a better look at this overhead view. Okay, wow, pardon the mess. I have a lot of things here because I'm going to do all this testing, including the power draw, to show you if you're going to be able to get full performance out of this particular charger here. Now, right off the bat, if you look at it, it is actually a little bit slimmer. And the power cord, right, is actually attached externally. This is the power cord that comes with the Ugreen charger. Very, very well-made cord. In fact, I've not seen a cord that is that well-made outside of a hi-fi product. And look at this. There's no kink in the coiling, so everything came tightly wound up and fitted inside this little box here, which is actually a very well-made box, in terms of packaging. But, you've got to really give it to them. The packaging is really, really nice here. And this power cable fantastic, very, very well made, very durable. But for the purpose of testing today, I'm just going to be using this short cable because I want to go through the power meter and I want you to see the power delivery without all the cables running all over the place. So if you take a look at the plug on the original charger, this is a UK plug, which is what we use in Singapore. In the US, it's going to be a little bit slimmer, a lower profile, but this is removable, right? But the problem is when it comes like this, you have to plug it into the wall. It is actually going to be staying on the wall. This, you can actually use the 1.5 meter cable that comes with it, and you can route it and you can put it on your desk, right? With just a cable trailing out. This needs to be sitting at the wall, which is probably going to be a distance away from your desk. Now, the other thing is also, sometimes you go to your office or you go into those conference rooms or meeting room, you have to plug this into those recessed cutouts on the table. This is very hard to fit in. Whereas for this particular one, I can just run the cable and this is all I need, right? I plug it out. You can easily manipulate this plug to fit into those recessed power slots on the table. So in terms of versatility, in terms of usability, I think this gets a win. The Ugreen here gets a win. Physical dimensions, okay? I have a digital weighing scale here. I'm just going to run through this. Now, to be fair, okay, you actually have to take into account this plug here because I'm not measuring the weight of the cable. You could use a short cable like this, which weighs next to nothing. So I'm just going to be measuring the power brick itself. So this power brick here, this is the Apple's original. It comes in at 279 grams, okay? Pretty hefty. Size-wise is quite similar, just a tad smaller, but the thickness is actually, it's thicker, right? So this is the Ugreen, as opposed to the 279. This comes in at 286. It was at 87, 286. So it's just a scant 6, maybe 7 grams heavier than the original Apple charger. So if you are concerned about weight, if you are concerned about whether this is going to weigh you down any more than the original 96 watt charger, I would say no, it wouldn't. So the physical dimensions aside and all these functionalities aside, you have to take note of these special features where it can charge 4 devices simultaneously. So in this picture here, you will see that there's a tablet, there's a laptop, there's a phone, and there's another phone, right? You may not have so many charging devices to charge at one time, but it is always good to have that flexibility. Now, what kind of laptops can it charge, right? So here it states the laptop. Now this list is definitely not exhaustive. I've charged Windows laptop, I've charged Lenovo laptops, I've almost charged everything in the house, including the Sonos Roam speaker, but another thing altogether. And in terms of the phone, it will be able to charge the Apple phone up to even the iPhone 12 on a quick charge. I will do the testing in a bit for Xiaomi, for Samsung, Huawei, Google. They just put a ... Basically, it charges everything. So you don't have to care about this list at all. And also the iPad and the game devices, for completeness sake, I don't think they are being complete about it because they just put one for Nintendo Switch. But, Nintendo Switch, as long as it complies to, as long as there's a USB-C port, okay, or any other port that this charger can supply, which is basically the A and the C port, you can charge anything of that. But what is important is that there are some older chargers. The newer ones, yes, okay, granted they can do that, but some of the older chargers are actually so high powered that they can't trickle charge, right? So case in point, this particular earbuds here, this is a Ugreen earbud. Now, it takes a USB-C port, okay? It has a USB-C port, so basically it's USB-C charging, but it only needs 5 volts at about 0.25 amps. So in other words, this tops out at 1.2 to 1.5 watts of charging. Some of the chargers that I've used, they are actually not capable of supplying a current that is so small. So the finesse of those chargers aren't there, but thankfully, this I've tried, it actually charges brilliantly. Okay, so as I have mentioned earlier, these 4 ports, which I will get to testing very, very quickly, the 4 ports, the first 2 are capable of 100 watts with up to 5 amps of current. So power, as you know, is wattage, right? Is in terms of volts times current. So 20 volts times 5 amps will give you 100 watts. So that's how it works. For the third port, the third USB-C port here, it actually outputs up to 20 watts. So if you have a power hungry laptop, or actually any laptop, you should plug it into the first two ports. Okay, and even your larger tablets, you should plug it into the first two ports. The third port is mostly for your fast charging iPhones. The fourth port is a USB-A port. So if you are still using one of those older cables, you can plug it here. It supports quick charge as well. 12 volts at up to 1.5 amps, which gives you 18 watts. Now, one thing to note about this is that, yes, while each port is capable of outputting 100 watts, right, you don't expect to plug everything in and everything is able to do 100 watts, 100 watts. It is actually a cumulative total of about 100 watts. So in this particular chart here, you'll see that if you're only using one port, the USB-C, the first port will give you 100 watts, or you using only the second, it will give you 100 watts. Basically, you'll be able to max out the output from each of these. But if you use any of the two ports, then the distribution is right about here. Say you're using the port 1 and port 2, then either port will be supplying 65 watts plus 30 watts. So it will be split up. If you're using one of the first two ports with the other port, then one of the ports will be supporting a 65 watt, and then the rest of the power will go to one of these two ports supplying either 20 or 18 watts. If you are using the third and the fourth together, then you'll only be getting 10.5 watts here and 10.5 watts here. So that's the restriction with multi-port usage. And the power split, the power distribution actually goes down with the third port used with 3 simultaneous ports, or even with 4 simultaneous ports. So at 4 simultaneous ports, basically these two ports will be giving you 10.5 watts, and the first two will be giving you 45 or 30, depending on which you plug in first, I think. Right, so that one will be able to give you the 45, and the second one that you plug in to either port 1 or 2 will give you the 30 watt. So just bear in mind, while they say while they list the spec for each of the port, it doesn't mean that when you plug everything in, it will give you a cumulative total. The cumulative total is still limited to the power core here of supplying up to 100 watts of power. So the next thing we're going to be doing is to switch over to the overhead view again, and I want to be testing the power draw of these two chargers. Okay, how much power can it really supply? Now, I have this set up here. This is these two are power meters. Now, just bear in mind that although they look different, the functionality and the calibration is actually pretty similar. These are not complex devices, so the accuracy is somewhat there. Okay, so now we are charging the MacBook Pro 16-inch directly from the original MacBook Pro charger. This is the 96 watt version of the original Apple charger that came equipped with the MacBook Pro 16. So this is the power meter reading. It has negotiated right about just shy of 20 volts and pulling 4 over amps, which results in a power draw of about 87 watts. Now I've seen this guy pull slightly above this amount, but right now what we can see on screen, see now it's hitting 90 watts. So about 20 volts, just shy of 20 volts, pulling 4.5, 4.6 amps, and delivering 91 watts. All right, so this sounds like the peak. Let's now switch over to the Ugreen charger. So on the Ugreen charger, we're going to be using one of the first two ports, which when used on its own is able to supposedly supply 20 volts at 5 amps for a total draw of 100 watts. So let's take a look at the meter here. Now it's going to take some time. It is probably negotiating the charge now. So it is up to the MacBook to pull however much power it needs from this particular charger here. So it is now at right about 20 volts as well. But I noticed that it's just slightly lower, 19.8, as opposed to 19.99 on the Apple original MacBook Pro 96 watt charger. It has now negotiated just shy of 2 amps for a total power draw of 40 watts. It usually takes a bit of time, a couple of seconds, sometimes minutes, for it to negotiate a full power charge, a full power draw from the charger. So you can see now it's pulling about 3.1 amps already. So it's now drawing 63, 64, 65 watts, still climbing. So if you reference to this power meter here, this is the amount of power that the power brick is drawing from the wall, right? So here it says 79 watts and here it says 72 watts, right? So if you take a look, there is a discrepancy. Now there's about a 10% power loss, right? Because the power loss due to the inefficiencies in the charger converting this, it also converts and loses the power to heat. So right about now, you will see that it is now drawing close to 100 watts from the wall. And over here, it says 88.8 watts. So the voltage has actually sagged a little bit. Now it's at 19.4 volts thereabout, and it's at 4.6 amps. But to the laptop, they're not looking at the power nor the current draw. So what is important is actually it is drawing right about 88, 89 watts from this particular charger here. So it seems to be quite stable. It's just shy of 89 watts thereabout, and as compared to the original Apple charger at 91 watts. So besides the Apple MacBook Pro, which is a very high current draw device, which requires up to 90 over watts, what about the other devices such as this iPad Air, which is now at a current charge of 70% battery charge? So this is the original Apple charger, and let's see how much power it's drawing. It has negotiated 15 volts. Okay, so if we're gonna leave the screen on, let's turn the screen on, it should draw right about 25 watts or so. This is at 15 volts, 1.4 amps, 1.8 amps, okay? And well, it will fluctuate about 25 watts, which is on par for this particular iPad Air here. And let's get this to a lit screen so that we know that it's drawing as much power and demanding as much power from the charger as possible. 25 watts. Let's switch this over to the Ugreen PD charger. Okay, it has negotiated, well, right about there, 15 volts or so, and drawing 1.35 amps for a total of 20 watts. Okay, so just give it a bit of time. It seems to need a little bit of time to ramp up to the full power draw and requirements from the wall socket. So it's now climbing up to 23, 24. This is 25 watts, okay? So similar performance for an iPad Air, drawing right about 25 watts. So no difference between these two chargers. All right, so let's go on to another power-hungry device, and that is the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. This is the previous generation, not the newest mini LED one. I've not upgraded that. So let's move over to the original iPad charger. Okay. I won't be plugging into the Magic Keyboard because with the Magic Keyboard port, it actually lowers the charging rate. Direct to the iPad Pro 12.9-inch itself, it has negotiated 15 volts and it's putting through 1.4 amps right now. It should climb just slightly. I've seen this guy pull right about 45 watts total. In other words, it's drawing 3 amps. Let me see the charge state of this iPad Pro at the moment. Okay, it's at 77%. Because it's at 77%, it might not demand so much power so as to preserve the battery life. So I've just turned the screen on just so that, okay, I'm just going to show something meaningless. Okay, so it's pulling north of 25 watts here for the iPad Pro, 28 watts now. Okay, so the conclusion is I don't think the iPad Pro 12.9-inch is going to be pulling its full 45 watts now because the charge state of the battery is right about 77%, which is pretty high. Okay, so I'm going to switch over. We have seen it fluctuate between 25, 26, up to 28 watts of draw. So it should do the same when we turn over to the PD charger from Ugreen. So connected on its own, it has negotiated 15 volts. So I have noticed that the voltage that the PD charger from Ugreen is putting out to the device is just a little bit short of the voltage that the Apple original charger is putting out. So original charger was putting out about close to 15 volts, and this one is now at 14.8 volts or so, right? So it's drawing 1.7 amp or so 25 watts. All right, I think in terms of powering an iPad Pro, in this particular case, I think it's still on par. Okay, so now we've figured out that the original Apple charger is capable of pulling out 91 watts of charging power, but all through a single port. And this particular charger here, we have tested this and they were able to put out right about 89 watts of charger. So is this better in terms of charging performance? I would say it is pretty close, just short of 2 watts of power. In the grand scheme of things, that is just above 2% difference. I would say it is within the same ballpark. Now, what I think what matters then is that the fact that this has only one port and this has 4 ports. Now, what does 4 port mean? It means you can do this. This is the MacBook Pro. This is a 16-inch version. And this is the iPad 12.9-inch version. Okay, this is in iPhone Pro Max. And this is an iPhone mini. So let's assume that you work with this number of devices, right? How are you going to be able to charge this all at the same time with the original Apple charger? You can't. You have to do it one at a time and you got to keep rotating. Now, of course, if you want to charge all 4 of these devices together at the same time, you will need this Ugreen charger. Yes, it does mean that you have to carry all these cables around, but let's try that out, shall we? We can't use this meter anymore because this meter measures one device at one time. We're just going to be using the monitor here on the wall socket. So it measures how much power this charger is pulling from the wall. So before we do that, let's make sure that the MacBook Pro is turned on and that it will pull as much power as possible and tax the power supply. So I'm going to be plugging it in to charge now. Let's see how much power it pulls. Okay, the MacBook Pro says is trying to charge at the moment. Okay, it's pulling 30 odd watts now. So I have connected another original USB-C cable to the second USB-C port there, which on its own is also able to supply up to 100 watts of power. Right? So this is the iPad Pro 12.9-inch version, the previous version. Right now, before I even plug in the iPad Pro, it is now pulling about 40 odd watts from the wall socket through the Ugreen PD charger. And this is as demanded by the MacBook Pro. It is now just below 50 watts. 50 watts. So this number will start climbing slowly as the laptop starts demanding and pulling more and more power to charge itself. The MacBook Pro now is at 44% battery life after we did all the testing. It is now drawing 65 watts from the wall socket. At its peak, it should be drawing, I would say, close to 100 watts even, right? Because there's some power loss, remember that? So if you take 10% from 100 watts, right, 90 watts should be coming to this guy. So right about there, I think we were maxing it out earlier when we hit 89 watts or so. So this is probably not as efficient as the original charger in terms of converting the energy from the wall into the laptop, right? Because this is rated at 96 watt, but it was putting out 91 watts to the MacBook Pro. Whereas this rated for 100 watts, it was putting, yep, there you go, 89 watts. So now it's pulling 90 over watts from the wall, closing in on 100 watts already. It's at 94 now, 95. Okay, I think you get the idea. This guy is pulling close to 100 watts from the wall. Okay, it's going to keep numbing. Oh, 99.5. There you go. I think for all intents and purposes, this is right about 100 watts. There you go. Okay, so the thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug in the second device to the second port. This is an iPad Pro 12.9 inch. Let's do that right now. Okay, so when that happens, okay, the charging power will be redistributed. Okay, you saw a dip just now, right? Because it's trying to recalibrate and saying how much power should I send to the first port and how much power should I send to the second port now. So between the two, it will try to split the power. And I have explained earlier that when you plug two devices in, it doesn't double the power output to 200 watts. It just basically shares the 100 watts output. So the MacBook Pro is charging and the iPad Pro is charging as well at the same time. All right, let me just unlock it. Yep. Oh, Colonel Sanders. Never mind. The picture is just a dumb picture, placeholder. All right. But anyway, it is charging. So combined is pulling about 76, 77 watts now. It will keep going up higher, right, as the current draw stabilizes. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to be charging the two iPhones that I have mentioned earlier. So one is using a USB-C to Lightning cable, and the other one is using a USB-A to Lightning cable. So USB-C goes into the third port, which is capable of putting out 20 watts. Okay, and that goes to the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Okay, now it started charging as well. So at this point in time, all the devices are charging. So the iPad Pro is charging, the MacBook Pro is charging, and the iPhone 12 Pro Max is also charging. It is now pulling 93 watts, 94, close to 94 watts from the wall socket. And the last device that I'm going to plug in is using a USB-A port to Lightning cable, plugging into an iPhone 12 mini. Again, let me power the screen on. Okay, so from the screen of the MacBook Pro, I see that it's charging. From the iPad Pro, it is also charging. The iPhone 12 Pro Max is also charging, and the iPhone 12 mini is also charging. Now, all the screens are turned on, right? And it is drawing right about 90 watts from the wall socket. So this charger is basically going, working overtime, right? Pulling almost 100 watts, 90 watts of power from the wall to distribute across all your devices. And they may be charging slower than the intended speed or the optimal speed that you want, but the flexibility is there, right? Let's say you're not pressed for charging a laptop to go into a presentation and you just need to supply power to all your devices. You can actually do so all at the same time using this Ugreen PD charger, as opposed to having to switch around using this single port charger original from Apple. So guys, I hope you have found today's in-depth review of this PD charger from Ugreen with up to 100 watts output through 4 ports useful. And you can tell why I actually prefer this charger to the original Apple charger. Although it can do 96 watts as well, confidently, it is still limited to just one port here. So this is actually very, very versatile. So if you do need another charger to replace, my suggestion is do consider this Ugreen charger very, very carefully. I think it is well delivered, well packed, well designed, well thought out. I think this is my go-to charger for the foreseeable future, until something newer comes out, something more powerful comes out, maybe 120 watts, 150 watts, I don't know. All these things, all these chargers keeps getting better and better. So there you go. I think the Ugreen charger is a much better buy than the original Apple charger. If you are a power user like me, I charge a lot of devices all at the same time, then for convenience, this is probably the guy that you should be getting. I'll see you in my next video.